Hello, and welcome to the second video in this experimental Eternal Challenge Run video series. Challenge runs are traditionally performed in single-player games, but I've taken advantage of Eternal's robust player versus environment experience, and I've ported the format here. This time around, our challenge will be to win a Gauntlet match without playing any power whatsoever. Before we begin this challenge run, let's take a moment to clarify the rule set that we're going to use. As always, the challenge will be complete when we have defeated a single Gauntlet opponent on the lowest difficulty. Last time, we managed to do this without spending any power. This time around, we're turning it up, and we're not allowed to play any power cards whatsoever. Now, we're still allowed to have power in our deck in order to meet the minimum power requirements for deck building, but we're not going to be able to play any of the power cards that we draw. That's the only restriction this time around. We're allowed to play all other card types if we can find a way to play them. Not being able to play any power cards is going to add an additional difficulty beyond simply not having any power to spend. Power cards are the primary source of influence in Eternal, and you need influence to play most of the zero-cost cards in the game. All is not lost, however, as we do have another way to gain influence, this cycle of Evangels. While they do give us some influence and can get us started, it will be difficult to reliably get two or even a single influence of a particular color, given that we're shifting from having, 25, 50 power in a deck to just these 4 Evangels that we then need to draw. While Sand Warrior was our starting point for the previous challenge, his triple time influence requirements means that's not going to work this time around. We will have to look elsewhere. Fortunately, there is one set of cards in Eternal that costs us neither power nor influence to cast. And no, I'm not talking about Spiked Helm or Stranger's Mark, although these do technically fit the bill. I'm talking about the 5 cards pictured here, which are all free to play under certain circumstances. In Eternal, being able to play a card for free means that you can play them without meeting their power or their influence requirements that you would normally need to meet. And of course, given how difficult it will be for us to get influence, not costing any influence is going to be important. For example, you could slam down an Infernus as the very first card that you play in a game. Infernus is a very common choice for first turn combos, but since that's not quite what we're trying to do here, I'm going to save myself some resets mulliganing for Inferni, and I'm going to take a look more at the other 4 cards for this challenge. The next 3 cards are all units, which if we can get them into play could end the opponent, but our real mover and shaker is going to be the last card here, Stormhalt Knife. Aggro players in regular Eternal matches rightly fear the knife for its game-turning potential, and that's more or less what we're looking to do with it here. While the other X2 units could be charred down by the Fire AI decks, the Stormhalt Knife is a lot harder to remove, and it will offer us both repeatable removal and repeatable face damage. The only caveat is that we're going to need to get down to 10 health before we can play it, but I'm sure our AI opponents will be happy to assist us with that. Deck building for this challenge was a lot less focused than in the previous challenge. I knew that I wanted Stormhalt Knife to be the centerpiece of the deck, and Armorsmith is of course a slam dunk with the knife, but there really aren't that many other cards that synergize with those two. They're free, so you don't need any of the Evangels, and all of the fate effects that you could play in the deck would gain you health, which is anti-knife synergy. So the rest of the deck is kind of a backup plan, or realistically, something to do with your time while you're waiting for Stormhalt Knife to turn on. I included all the other free units, except for Infernus, because Infernus gives me anxiety, and Lumen Shepherd made its obligatory appearance. I ended up going with a Shadow Evangel, which gave me access to a couple of interesting cards. Borrowed Violence and Last Chance are 2 zero-cost spells to give me a chance to actually cast that Northwind Herald some of the time. And they have good synergy with the free units, Borrowed Violence buffing them up, and Last Chance giving me the opportunity to replay them. It also gives me access to Faceless One, a card that we can't actually cast, but when we discard it to hand size, it pops right back out of the void and gives us an extra free unit. Ironically, both Spiked Helm and Stranger's Mark, which we made fun of earlier, made their way into the deck, and so did Zoltan Arbalest. But that was wrong and bad. Don't play Zoltan Arbalest. 25 unplayable time sigils round out our list and brings our deck up to 75, and we're now ready to begin the challenge run itself. Moving now into the run itself, I'm going to take a moment to say that I have a lot of moments to take. One of the disadvantages with this style of challenge run is that everything takes a very long time. The AI is obliging in beating us down to the 10 HP that we need in order to actually play the Stormholt Knife, but they lack the tools to do so effectively, so it takes a very long time. 1-1s are not exactly the most aggressive of units, and unfortunately, a 0-7 means that even though we got a clever Faceless one play, it didn't really amount to anything. So we just sit there and we discard power while waiting, as our opponent very slowly beats us down. We have the pieces we need, it's just a matter of time. I will also take a moment to say that the only thing that was forbidden in this run involving power was playing it. Discarding it to hand size like we do here is totally fine. Here we draw our Zoltan Arbalist, and it's terrible because it prevents us from getting down to the HP that we needed. So it slows us down a bit, but fortunately our opponent comes through with a Rabble Rouser and drops us down to the appropriate levels. Now we're finally able to make our move. 2 copies of Borrowed Violence and 3 copies of Armorsmith combine to give us a very large Stormholt Knife and a fairly respectable board. From here, the goal is in sight. It's just a matter of actually knocking the AI down to 0 HP. We attack with everything and trade off to clear out the board, use a last chance in order to bring back the 4-2 that got traded off, and the majority of the decisions are done. The AI's imminent demise has been accelerated for your convenience. There ended up being a lot of overlap between this run and the previous challenge run that we did, and in fact, you could actually probably use this deck in order to complete the previous challenge. Stormholt Knife is just so much more powerful than anything the AI is doing at this difficulty level. And it certainly proved its worth here, as we were able to prove with this final attack that it is possible to beat the Gauntlet without playing any power cards. Thanks for watching, and please stay tuned for the third and final challenge run video that I've already recorded. As always, your suggestions and comments on how to improve the video are greatly appreciated, and I'm particularly on the lookout for ideas for future challenges.